it'll that sound means that I'm recording. So to preface this long story of videos, I need to remind the audience, our family, is that we currently have 7 kids, a dog, and so there may be distractions going on. So we're trying to do them in a non-distracting time, but sometimes that doesn't work out for everybody. So, all right. You wanted to add some thoughts from yesterday, but nobody's going to see yesterday's because I forgot to record the audio. So I've got the video and you look great, but we can't hear anything from yesterday.
Okay.
Do you want to add those thoughts?
No, let's go back and.
You want to do that question again?
Yeah, but not right now.
Okay, we can do it another time. Okay. So Tony, somebody doesn't want this to happen. So okay. So the question is, you ready?
Yeah.
So when did you first fall in love?
With Mom or other girls?
When did you first fall in love?
I don't think I knew what falling in love meant until years after we were married. Puppy love, there were girls I had crushes on, but that was not love. I think the first time that there was real love involved was with Twyla. I mean, she and I were dear friends. She was from Rexburg, Idaho. I was from Shelley, about 30 miles or so apart. But this was in California. Her parents were very kind and invited me into their family. And so I would have to say that my first real falling in love experience was with Twyla. I cannot hear you.
So she gave you books, right, that you enjoyed?
Oh, yeah, but that had nothing to do with our falling in love. I think the key to understanding this first love affair is that.
Okay, wait. So let's scroll back. When you say love affair, we don't want to give people the wrong impression.
Oh, well, that's their problem. While you were out, I talked about meeting Twyla and becoming good friends with her. Okay. We were both in Southern California, and both of us disliked the fast pace of life, the beach scene, the freeways, all that kind of stuff was not to our liking. And so we gravitated towards each other at different activities, parties, the institute, night classes, those kinds of things. Within a couple, 2 or 3 months, we were fast friends. Later, her dad became our bishop. He was a professor on the campus.
What campus was that? What city in California?
San Bernardino Valley Junior College. We lived in Rialto. The college was over in San Bernardino.
And what were you doing there?
After my mission, I got a job and got fired from it because I was too good. That's a story, I don't know. Anyway, my older brother, one of my older brothers, Perry, invited me to come and live with them. That's Perry and Marilyn, and their kids are Jody. And Troy. And Troy's dead. Anyway, I went down.
For clarity, Perry is dead as well.
Perry is my older brother, about 6 years older than I am.
How many? So while we're in this moment, I don't want to leave the story, but how many siblings do you have that are still alive? How many siblings did you have total?
I have 11 brothers and sisters. 2 were deceased. 5 brothers. 6 brothers, and I was number 7, and 5 sisters.
So you had, that's 12, Dad. 5 plus 7 is 12.
That's me, and 12. The twins died on the day they were born, before I was born. And then they've just gradually died off. And those who remain, I have a younger brother named Bruce. He's about 1.5 years, 2 years younger than me. And I have 3 older sisters. Jean is the oldest, then Bonnie, and then Rose. Jean lives in Idaho Falls, spent her life in Las Vegas. Bonnie, her husband was in computers, and they spent many, many years in California, and they now are retired in Oregon. And Rose is retired, and she and Doug live in Blackfoot.
So
Bruce is a retired veteran, and he is in a veterans care center and has
7 of your siblings have passed away. 7 of your 11 siblings have passed away.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We'll get more to that later. Well, I think there's a moment I think I should share here from my perspective. I want to say 1983 or 1984. When did Uncle Wendell pass away?
It was before that, a couple of years before that, probably 1981.
This was one of my earliest memories then, because I would have only been 3 or 4 years old. I think that was the first time in my life I saw you cry.
That's because I always went away from you. I cried a lot.
Well, I know. I'm just that's what I remember. I think that's the first time I ever saw you cry. And there hasn't been many other times. We can talk about your emotions later, but
you might be right. 83.
I mean, I don't think I could have made that up. I have a visual in my head of where we were in our old house, and you and Mom were laying in bed, not laying in bed, but sitting up in bed, and I walked into the room. Anyway,
well, it was unexpected,
right, and early, based on everybody's age at the time, and
yes,
stuff, right.
And he lived at that time in Burley and owned a sports shop. And that's where your mom's from, Burley.
So you go to California to live with your brother. were you done with Idaho at that point, or what? So you got home from your mission, and just what
I
was?
didn't know it at the time. I went there because as a California, you could get a full-time job and be a California resident, which then meant you could go to school for almost free. It cost me like $13 a semester once I became a resident. So I left in the spring. Like I said, I got fired because I was doing too good of a job and the other men were jealous. Different story. So I drove to California. Car broke down. We towed it from up on the high desert. I stayed with Perry in Maryland for, I can't remember. I didn't keep a journal, but eventually I could see that I was an extra burden on Maryland, not so much on Perry, because he was working a lot, but sometimes with my school schedule. But I got into summer school and made the commitment, I am staying until I get through or go to BYU. And so I got a dinky scholarship, but it was in those days and in my life, it was really important. I got the faculty scholarship from San Bernardino, and with some other things going on in my life, disengaged from Twyla, I headed for Seattle to work for the summer. And this is in '88. And stopped on my way up there and got an apartment.
88 or 68?
68, I'm sorry. See,
1968, you left California to go to Seattle.
right.
Okay. For
And
work.
to work for the summer, my brother Van was up there, and there was an apartment, a house full of boys, guys, adults, returned missionaries, etc. On my way up there, I had stopped in Provo, put money down on an apartment where I could walk to BYU. It's up on Briar Avenue, and secured a job. So I went up to Seattle knowing I had a job and a place to stay when I came back.
When you came back to Provo.
I came back to Provo and stayed.
So we're getting not off topic, which is fine. So what happened between you and Twyla? Why did you? So this is the first woman that you've ever loved. What happened?
Okay. Eventually, in our relationship, it was 2 years long. I gave her an engagement ring. Okay.
So you wanted to marry her?
Yes. And
Did
she wanted to marry me.
She wanted to marry you. I think that's important. I've been on the other side of both of those twice.
She accepted it. And then I found out that that her former boyfriend, and I'm not sure they were engaged or not. Anyway, he went on his mission and came back, and Twyla's mother, her dad was a bishop and he kind of stayed out of it, but she was a little bit, oh, Twyla, don't you think you should wait and see him before you commit to less? And she was wearing my ring. And there was a lot of problems put on. Do you want the full truth? Yes, you do. I was teaching seminary early morning during that time. My students were in my ward. Twyla was in my ward. My students knew we were engaged. And then Twyla comes to me and says,
when you say your students, what do you mean your students?
My seminary students. Go ahead and take care of the problem.
So you were teaching seminary, going to college. This was before you had to have a degree to teach seminary, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it was early morning.
Okay.
They could get anybody they could find.
Okay.
Ask me a question later on about my experience in early morning. So Twyla listened to her mother and said, you know, my former boyfriend is coming down to see me, and my mother wants me to meet him with no strings attached.
Even though you were even though you guys were engaged,
Exactly.
you wanted her to meet her ex-fiance.
Yeah. So we get into this wild argument and childish. And she says, "Well, I'm not going to give you your ring back. You have to take it back." That kind of an argument. I says, "You accepted it. If you don't want it, you give it back to me." And I turned and started to walk out the door. And she threw it at me, hit me in the back. And I just kept on walking. I didn't pick it up. And she was in tears. Well, the next Sunday, he's arrived and they go to church
Do
together.
you think you handled that situation?
Of course not.
Well, no, I'm just I don't I don't want to talk about regrets, but I mean this is the first woman that you fell in love with, so
I
okay.
was angry. I was heartbroken.
Oh,
And I
we
understand.
know we've had this talk before.
So he's there in church and he has given her his engagement ring and she's wearing it. And I didn't want to go to church and confront him or be confronted or embarrassed. So I drove up the canyon and walked the railroad, just trying to get away from everything. Well, next morning was Monday morning seminary, and some of the more inquisitive girls said, "Brother Campbell, who was that guy with Twyla, and why was she wearing a different ring?" Now, girls noticed this. I didn't, and it just, but she had accepted a ring from him. But she had promised me, "I'll tell you if there's anything that happens." We went on for almost 2 weeks. She never said a word. And the girls in class kept peppering me. Boys didn't care. And so it was the following week. This Her new fiance had spent the whole week and was going back up to Rexburg to get into school. And so I got in my car and went across the valley into San Bernardino, where she worked in a beautician's shop. And it was like 8:30 or 9 in the morning, and I drove into the parking lot. And I love this. This is the evil natural man in your dad, one aspect of it. The parking lot was full of loose gravel. You know what a rooster tail is?
I do. What kind of car did you have?
It was a Bel Air, an old one, because my other one broke down and it was more expensive to fix it. And my bishop helped me get a car and I made payments on it. So I walked into the beauty salon and there was Twyla with her hands in somebody's hair and 2 or 3 others. And I didn't even care about manners, courtesy. I was angry and I was hurt. And I opened the door and stood inside and I said, "You told me you would tell me if anything happened, and you didn't. You're a liar." I just let it all out. She started to cry. And that made me feel even better because there were these 3 women and 3 customers, clients in their chairs, and they were hearing all of this. And Twyla was getting an earful. And I turned around, got in the car, and did rooster tails all the way out of the parking lot. And it was splattering against the glass of the salon. And I thought, good.
Never saw her again.
Huh?
Never saw her again after that.
I did. I did see her again. Next week, I was in Seattle working. Okay. Twyla's fiance. I mean, I could write a small pamphlet on this. Twyla's fiance went up to Rexburg and in the following weeks met another girl and asked Twyla to give him his ring back because he was getting engaged. I mean, you can't make this kind of stuff up.
Well, and I think I need to clarify for the audience is historically, men and women of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints maybe not as much anymore, but they rushed into marriage. Would you say that that's
Yeah.
there's pressure? There is pressure on a missionary who comes home to find somebody and to get married and to have kids.
It was a 2-year courtship. Okay, I'm repeating. It was a 2-year courtship, so I didn't think I was rushing into anything with Twyla. Now I know I did with Mom.
I'm explaining her fiance went up to Idaho and 2 weeks later found a girl. I'm saying that's not uncommon.
No, not at all. So I went to Seattle. I think she wrote me one letter and I wrote her a letter, and I didn't see her until September. School started, and I never expected to see her again. But after she had lost her second fiance, guess who she came looking for? So
Your brother.
no,
I'm just kidding. Okay. She came back to you.
she quit her job in San Bernardino and moved to Provo. And it wasn't long. I think the first time I saw her, we were at a devotional. Linda and I were at a devotional. We're skipping the meeting with Linda.
So Linda is my mom and your current wife.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Clarify, only wife, not current wife. Only wife.
Yeah. She walked in front of us and looked up and saw me sitting next to Linda. Okay. So here I am, and this is, and Mother is totally, absolutely right on this issue. I was very confused. I jumped too quick. But I met Mother as a result of some mutual friends that we had that I met in Seattle. And when school started, we all came down, and Susan Yoakum invited me and some other friends from Seattle, invited Linda because they had been roommates at Rexburg. And that's where I first met your mother. It was a kind of a dance hootenanny kind of a thing. A hootenanny is somebody brings a guitar and we all sing love songs and whatever. And so the first words I ever spoke to Mother, she had a beautiful long fall. I didn't know it was a fall. I thought it was a real hair. And she was chewing gum with her mouth open about as fast as the music was playing. She was dancing with another guy. And I walked by to get over to get some refreshments, and I said, chew your gum with your mouth closed. It's the first things I ever spoke to Mom was chew your gum with your mouth closed. And I went over, and then a few minutes later, I thought, oh, you should go apologize. So I went and asked her to dance, and that's when our life together started.
So going along with the question, we'll talk about Mom in another time.
Okay.
When did you first fall in love with? What other things did you fall in love with? Sports, books, reading, history, geography.
Wow.
Could you actually say that you love? I mean, at some point, you loved BYU football. At some point, you love geography. At some point, you love teaching.
Love for the scriptures, especially the Book of Mormon. I have a great love affair, and I'll just put this in there. I've made a commitment to read the scriptures for an hour every day, and I made this years ago. And I've gone through the Book of Mormon twice since January, and this is April 8th, including the new. I love the scriptures. I love learning.
So I want to go back to this. I want to go back to this time, this moment when you decided to leave Idaho and go to California.
Okay.
at what moment or at what time did you realize that Shelley, Idaho was not going to give you the life that you thought it would, or dreamed it would, or hoped it would, or whatever?
I am not a farmer. I spent thousands of hours growing up working on farms, pitching baled hay, potatoes, harvesting potatoes, planting potatoes, irrigating potatoes. It was not something that I liked to do, but it was a source of money, and my family needed their kids to have. Mom and dad were poor. We were poor. And
So when you
I
say poor, uh,
my father spent, I'm exaggerating here, but he spent a major, or a significant is a better word, a significant part of his life in the hospital or in the bedroom in an oxygen tent. Vividly clear. He did not ever have a really, really good job. He worked for people on their farms. He was a police officer. He had a heart attack driving a police car and went in the back of a potato truck. He was the ditch rider on the canal. And that's what cost me my job, is because in the spring in Idaho, they take all of the old growth, dried up weeds that are tumbled in the canal and get them out and burn them. Well, my father hired me after my mission because it was time to clean the canal so the water could flow through. And at the same time, my uncle Bryant Stringham was also working. And so we kind of manipulated working together as a team. And we worked out a system. And this is what got me fired, is there were about 4 other teams of men who hired on to go clean other canals that Dad was in charge of. So what I would do is I would take a torch on a broom handle or a shovel handle, wrap it in tar or oil and a gunny sack, and I would literally run up, zigzag, up the canals from one side to the other. For miles I'd do this. And then my uncle would come along to make sure that the fires were contained and all the loose brush and dead grass, etc., got consumed. And then I would work back and do the same thing that he was doing. Well, after about 4 days of this, Dad was accused of nepotism. But we figured out that we were doing 4 and 5 times as many miles, my uncle and I, than the other guys combined. And they would just lollygag along, and, you know. And so they were very jealous, and they insisted that Dad fire me, which he did.
how did that make you feel when you got fired from work by your own dad?
Oh, I understood why he had to do it. It was the law, nepotism. You can't hire, but I was never his favorite. I mean, we outworked everybody. And I understood. I loved my dad, and he gave me some money, and that I earned enough money to get gas to California. And
Okay. All right. So the first time you fell in love, it was not with my mom, your wife. We'll talk about that in another story. I think we're done for the night, unless you want to add anything.
I must add this, and I always go to bed at night thinking, oh, well, I did it last time talking. To this day, I love Twyla because she provided a safe place, an oasis for me, because I was a non-Californian. I'm sorry to whoever may be listening, but that's not my gig. and as fast as I could get out of there, especially now with the heartache of splitting up. So when I went to Seattle, I think that's probably where I got the idea that I would never be going back to Shelley, because I had already set my goals on being a seminary teacher.
Okay. All right. I'll try and call you tomorrow, and we'll go with the next question. Here. Hey, Holly, come say hi to Grandpa before we.
Holly?